Justice League number 17, Scott Snyder writing, Jim Chung on the art. Oh, Chung did the whole issue.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah, whether you like that or not, it all feels consistently one-artist.
It does. It's been a while, in fact, since we've had a book like that from Justice League.
Yeah.
I mean, the annual last week was all one-artist, wasn't it?
Okay, the annual, sure, but even the Thanagar stuff, though, had the different art at the start and
back
the
and
end.
forth.
Yeah.
So it's been a little bit inconsistent in that sense. But
does this count as a Doom issue?
I don't think so. That's because this wasn't Tynan. In fact, this is the first one that's not been co-written by Tynan in the credits for like 5 issues or something like that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's why I was gonna ask, because it feels like the pacing, like it should be, but then it wasn't Tynan, so I'm like, is this kind of as a Justice League story?
Nah,
just a regular issue.
Yeah, it's a regular issue. It's Martian Manhunter, and obviously Lex is the co-star here, but it's still Martian Manhunter. Yeah, so this is an interesting issue where we're on Mars, and Jean's kind of called upon Lex to come and see him. And he's telling this story about what happened, because we found out last issue in the annual, or was it the issue before that, I can't remember. But we found out that Jean was held captive on Earth for some time as a child. And he's telling Lex about this, but he's also telling Lex about the religious kind of ceremonies that took place here, that no human had ever stepped in this place.
Shana.
There you go, that's the place. And there's a bit of a twist here in the story where eventually it turns out this kid, what was the kid using?
Albie,
that was it.
Which was weird, because I questioned, because John was like, "Hey Lex, can you help me find this Albie?" And Lex like, "You gotta give me more than go on. I know loads of Albies. Hell, like 3 of them work for me." I'm like, I've never heard this name before.
Yeah.
No.
That's a new name
also, I saw that redheaded mop of hair, and it reminded me of Secret Origin with Superman, and I was like, that's Lex Luthor.
Well, yeah, that's the twist. That's what I was getting at. Is that ultimately the twist is that this young Albie, who's the one kid who is nice to Jean when he's held captive, because Lionel's the one who's actually got him held captive, turns out to be Lex Luthor at the end. But his mind was erased, just like Jean's was after this. So Lex sort of, doesn't take this very well. He's kind of resisting it, and they end up running. There's this monster near here that was always there. Martians always had to keep it at bay with psychic power.
What are those names?
Didn't it?
It was
Quainars.
Quainars, yeah. No, it was Quonars, was it not? Quonars?
Quainars.
Yeah.
There we go.
And basically, because Lex thinks he's brought Jarrow with him, so Jarrow can mess with his head. However, though, Jarrow was just there to help psychically fight off these monsters. So
these dragons.
So Lex, kind of ruins things by disabling by disabling Jarrow, and this leads to them sort of running for their lives as we're getting this backstory and we're getting these kind of emotional beats where
I love the bit where they go, right, Jarrow, come on, fight through it, take this one, and then they just ride it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of the issue for the most part, and it ends in this kind of bittersweet note where Lex doesn't tell the rest of the League of Doom what he found out. He's like, nah, there was nothing worth sharing. Because there's a point where Martian Manhunter's trying to convince him to, like, hey, don't do this, don't try and wake up Perpetua. We can work together and we can solve this. You were this alibi. You can be this kid again. And there's at the end when the 2 portals are open, one to the Hall of Justice, one to the Hall of Doom. But Lex pushes him away and they separate. So, but it's setting the seeds where can Lex ultimately maybe realize he's doing the wrong thing?
So what I love is that Snyder took Lex, who's been a hero, right, for a while, right, coming into Rebirth. He was wearing the Superman S and whatnot, and then he made him a complete villain because he's all about Doom after the New Justice stuff. And now it's like, well, no, there's that portion of him that does want to do good still. It's still alive.
Lex is always the hero of his own story.
Right. And like now there's those doubts of, do I wake up Perpetua and really give the universe to Doom, or
that final moment where Lex is doing the Shan meditation thing that was really strong. The idea that really spoke to Lex, and he was like, right, I need to think about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and that whole ritual was this place where the Martians would go and basically reflect on their negative thoughts and emotions, and then purge them.
More specifically, get rid of them. It was like the idea of like you get rid of the bad memories and the pain. But ultimately, what Jean says to Lex, and the thing that Lex appeals to him is the idea that, yeah, you get rid of the bad memories because they just drag you down. But the whole idea that Jean's saying that, no, they make us stronger, they make us who we are, they make us build and strive to be better. At the end,
know what the bad times are to appreciate the good times.
Yeah, and at the end, when Lex says that to himself, it's almost like he wants to forget this again because this has given him doubts. That's kind of the moment. So
good.
It's actually really effective. I think this is one of the best issues of the run because it's a character story that has an arc, it is focused, and it's not just here. Let's explain a bunch of shit a page before the big thing happens.
Yeah, it really reminded me of his American Vampire. Like there was issues of American Vampire where stuff like this would happen. Like you'd have Skinner and Skinner Suite was such an SOB. And then there'd be this issue where you come to find out like, oh no, he actually would have a nicer side. And this reminded me of that so much. And I was like, yeah, this is a classic Snyder. This is exciting.
This was better Snyder. I think this is one of the best issues of the whole run. Because it was smaller. It wasn't this big, ridiculous, let's explain all this crap that's happening as it's happening.
It wasn't quite as good as last week's annual, but it's very good.
No, it's better than last week's annual. I'm saying it.
I will say
I agree.
I'm still not a huge fan of the backstory changing shenanigans with let's throw in young John with Lex here, and I don't know.
I don't know if it ends up paying off. Like this whole Justice League run is a story of Jean and Lex. I think that could be cool. Like.
Do you know what's funny? I didn't like when they changed Jean's backstory to say that he'd been held captive on Earth as a kid, and I still don't to a point. But this gave me something to like about it, like the idea that this is like a way to appeal to Lex's humanity, like before
I get that. I'm torn on it because, like I say, I didn't like that they changed it to do this, but okay, that's what we're doing, but. And then going, he was on Earth when I was a kid, and Lex was there. And I'm like, okay, it's one of those things.
Yeah.
Even though I like what it's doing.
So do we think now that they're going to rationalize all this by the reason that Jean was brought to Earth by Professor Erdell was because he's already been here? Like whatever technology that they used is the same one that Erdell happens upon. Like I think that could be okay because that really doesn't change. I mean, it changes Jean a little bit because it makes him seem like a chosen one kind of character. But, he wasn't just the last surviving Martian. And that's why he was brought over.
Because wasn't one of the arguments we're trying to say is that the reason why he survives the disease that wipes him out is because he's different, because he was on Earth.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's not the worst thing to retcon him into his story. Because we kind of have to justify how he survived in a way. So maybe this kind of works.
And also seeing his stuff here, it also makes me appreciate this version of his origin than what is going on in the mini.
It feels
like the mini's out of continuity.
Yeah, obviously, there's no reason why he can't then go back to Mars and become a corrupt cop, right? There's no reason why those two things can't also happen, but it feels so separate as an idea.
Yeah,
it
does. Well, and just the whole Martian culture and whatnot too, because we see his daughter Kim, and she's not this little blobby thing. And I just
was that how many kids? I thought that was him as the kid, and it was his parents who was
because he calls in it's like a memory that he's reliving with his wife and daughter.
Yeah.
I think
he calls her Kim.
Was that how many kid? Okay, fair enough. I think I thought it was when I first read that page, and then as it went on with him as a kid, I assumed it was then because I assumed because he was teaching Lex about this place that he was remembering when he was being taught about that place.
Yeah. But so anyways, I mean, there's room for both. I'm just saying to have them both out at the same time, and to have Martian Manhunter be this key figure in Justice League now, and also to have a
honestly, I think it's just the shock of the change. These changes here aren't actually that bad, I don't think, conceptually. It's just a case of we have to have time with them to get used to the idea that this is what the backstory for him is now. And I think if this sticks, if they stick to this backstory for Jean for like 10 years, I think in 10 years' time we're going to be like, this is a fine backstory. This is just what it's been for a while.
It kind of feels like what John used to do with his characters, where he'd introduce something, and you're like, oh wow, he's changing it, and then by the time you just get, it becomes part of that character. right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, don't get me wrong. One of my big pet peeves in stories is when they introduce a villain and they have to retcon the villain into the backstory so that it has this personal connection. And I'm like, nah, this was never there. At least this is like, no, this is changing his origin specifically. Like, no, this is about Jean himself, not just. Sure, Lex was there, but like, it's more about Jean as anything else. So, you know, I don't know. I am conflicted on it in some ways, but there are things to like.
I do love though that maybe this repressed memory is what causes his hatred for Superman so much. Is like he knows he can be friends with an alien deep down somewhere in his subconscious, but you know, Superman always is one-upping him. And
that's a really interesting twist to this, actually.
Right?
Yeah, if Lex as a kid was friends with an alien,
yeah,
what does that realization do, given how much he treats, you know, how much he feels about Superman? That's an interesting question to pose.
I don't disagree. I think, like I said, I'm a little just cautious about the whole thing. It feels like a lot to change.
There's almost something to do there with that, the idea of like just what growing up under Lionel for the next, 10 years or whatever it was.
You know, I feel like we're gonna get a better version of Smallville Lionel. You know, the mad scientist, Proto Lex.
Well, no, because it says here that after they gave this up, Lionel lost all of his money and stuff, right? So.
Yeah,
because that's why he joined the club and he was this drunk afterwards. Right. So that seemed to happen when Lex was quite young, so it wouldn't be like Smallville at all.
Well, no, but what I mean is, just because he's become a drunk doesn't mean he's gonna stop. Like that's what the whole club was about with the doorknob and all of that stuff. He still continued, just not at the level. So I want to see what that's like, and always the scheming and Lex is trying to not be his dad, but ends up becoming his dad.
I still think a doorknob being the hint for his son was a bit random.
Yeah. I think we'll find out though. You know,
they haven't justified why it was a random doorknob that was meant to be this big hint that his son was supposed to find.
Right.
I don't feel justified in that yet, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But that was a good issue. Art was good, not amazing. I think Chung's good, but not great.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's really solid though.
So. So yeah. Matt, what are you giving it?
8.5.
Connor?
I'm going to go with an 8. Didn't reach the heights of last week's.
I will go with 8.5. I thought it was better than last week's by quite a margin, actually.
Me too.